Hi, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and I've got Reed Little. How are you, Reed?
I'm doing great, Peter. How are things down under today?
Not too bad, not too bad. We're going to talk about David Bowie and the album Toy, which has been released, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's about to come out in Australia, but it's been in the US and UK. So, just setting up the scene, we go to the year 2000. So, you've got David Bowie at Glastonbury. So with the band that is touring with Glastonbury, and you've got the main band of Earl Slick on guitar, Gail and Dorsey on bass, Mike Garson on keyboards, Mark Platty on bass, and some others. And he got them into the studio, I think, in the month after the Glastonbury performance, which was in June 2000, to go back and look at his back catalogue from the years 64 to 1971 and re-record them. So the purpose of this Toy album was record it live, mix it, and put it out as a surprise album. The problem was that EMI Virgin were going through some financial difficulties and they were balking at releasing it. There was lots of issues, and I think behind the scenes, they probably didn't think it was commercial, and for whatever reasons, it didn't get released. And then you had the same band. So Bowie went to another label, went to Columbia, and recorded Heathen with the current band that put together Toy. So here we are in 2022, Toy gets released. Some of the tracks have appeared on Heathen B-sides, have been released to YouTube in various shapes or form. What do you think of this album, Reed?
All right. So I was really looking forward to the release of Toy. I'm a huge David Bowie fan. Now, what I don't do is I don't follow bootlegs and I don't collect singles. So as the music, if you're going to release an album in the digital age, you can never keep something to yourself, right? It's always out there. But I had never been exposed to these songs in any format. Now, unlike I think a lot of Bowie fans, I was a huge fan of Bowie's 90s output. I love Reeves Gabrels. I love his outside guitar playing, and Bowie's kind of, light electronic albums like One Outside and Earthling. I like those albums a lot. And I love Hours. And we could talk about Hours, ironically, for hours. And I think Heathen's good. But this album falls smack between Hours and Heathen. So to me, I think of it as kind of one of David Bowie's like palate cleanser albums, right? He occasionally will go through something where he's like, I just need to wipe the slate clean and start over. And I love his backing band, especially Mike Garson. And it's funny because I'm not normally a piano oriented listener, but Mike Garson is a phenomenal jazz pianist, and I love the jazz piano in a rock context. That is a great sound. But the flip side of that is, if we're being completely honest, in 1964, Bowie wasn't a very good songwriter. He was incredibly young. He was all over the map. He tried a little bit of psychedelia and it didn't work. He tried a bit of singer-songwriter, kind of folk artist, and that didn't work. He never had any level of commercial success until he joined up with Mick Ronson. Occasionally, you just have to find that right partner to get you moving. So my first thought when hearing that he'd recorded old songs with a new band, and a phenomenal band, was, can a good band elevate lesser material? Or is bad material going to bring down a good band? So nice philosophical question to frame the album with, right? And probably not surprisingly, my answer is sometimes. So my kind of too long didn't read review of Toys is I really like this album, but I don't love it. And I can go much more specifically on that, but there are 12 tracks on the primary Toys release. I absolutely love 5 of them. I think they are phenomenal. There are 7 that I like.
Right.
But I'm not particularly passionate about them.
Yep.
And frankly, for a late life Bowie album, that's not a bad ratio.
Right.
And the fact that he has 5 songs on it that I love is kind of remarkable. Although 2 of them, I think, are new songs that were written in the style of how he would have done music in the 1960s. And those 2 are actually in my favorite 5. Yeah. So the productions of the album, kind of song by song, definitely affect how I feel about it. Now, before I go detail song by song, give me your overall thoughts.
Well, my thoughts on this album are, well, I think that, yes, very early Bowie, he was learning the craft, but I will contest that that there weren't any decent songs in the period 64 to 70. There were some really, I think Bowie showed some maturity, a lot of maturity in some of his songs in that period. You've Got a Habit of Leaving, for example, which is the second song on the album, that appeared in the Heaven era as a B-side. I think that's a mature lyric and a well-crafted song. London Boys is a standout. I think that's been covered by Mark Ullman in the UK. It was an observational piece where a girl runs into London and falls into a drug habit. So this is an artist in the mid-60s that's got some sort of songwriting maturity, covering themes that are maybe slightly controversial for its time, but vastly a leap of maturity than that you would expect. That's just 2 that just come to mind. I think the band, when they were doing this project, did not listen to the original recordings. They went in cold. So it's a fresh interpretation of those songs between 1964 and 1971. And my issue with the songs are some of them are a bit straightforward. Like the first one is I Dig Everything. You listen to the original of I Dig Everything, and it's very much of its time. It's kind of bossa nova with that Ronettes type of backup singing. Only goes for 2 to 3 minutes. You listen to the version with this band, they stretch it out to 5 minutes. It's slowed down, and it's a much more straightforward rock presentation. So I agree with you. It's a mixed bag. There are some interpretations of the song which don't do it any justice and don't improve on the original. And I Dig Everything is sort of like a throwaway track, but there are some songs that I would put in the higher category, higher caliber category, and I've marked the ones Karma Man. The version that this band does, it has a nice harpsichord. It's Baroque pop. It's a bit of a throwback to the 60s, but it just gave me a shiver up my spine. It just brought back memories of those albums from 1967, 66, 67. Your Pet Sounds, which I know Bowie loves, Sgt. Pepper's, that sort of beautiful sort of Baroque British pop. Conversation Piece, I think that's a beautiful, heartfelt, personal song. Again, from that era, very observational, introspective lyrics, and shows a maturity well beyond his years. And actually, you could see that Ziggy Stardust was starting to kind of come together. That persona was coming together with a lot of these introspective and observational lyric type songs. And Shadow Man, I've got here a haunting ballad in fine voice. And that's kind of almost in the middle of the album. I take umbrage with the running order of the album. I think it could have been done in a better sort of order. And I think when you're doing these sort of projects, it's vitally important that you get the running order of the songs correct, because I dig everything as number one off the album. I think that's in the wrong place.
Yes.
And if you wanted to lead off with a stronger song, I think that would have been better for the overall scope of the album. So I've got a problem with the running order of the songs. But look, in summary, I think, how would it fall in the Bowie canon? Probably middle, but he's just such a class act. Middle is better than most output of artists. Right. I think that, some work, some don't work, but the majority, I think it's a really good, solid listening experience. I think one unkind critic, I was reading a lot of critical appraisal of this album, said it was pinups with no hits.
Right. Yeah, I guess I would have to disagree with that. Certainly, it's very different, but I agree with you about the running order. I Dig Everything is a weak song. It is. And it instantly is what it is. You listen to that song and it is absolutely a song from the 60s being played in the year 2000. And that establishes in your mind, well, this is what I'm listening to. To me, the very next song, You've Got a Habit of Leaving, is phenomenal.
Great song.
It's got this great Beach Boys harmony in it. I'm a sucker for harmony vocals. It's very upbeat. And if they had used that as song one, oh, what a better impression this album would leave. And I think kind of my theme listening to the album, much more than the music, because Bowie had a great band, but the band is interpreting existing material, right? Now, that's always a thing. I think people play best when they're playing their own stuff. But Bowie's vocal performance on this album is astounding. And I put it, not the album at the top of my Bowie list, but I think Bowie's vocal performance on this is at least as good as anything else he ever recorded.
Phenomenal.
He uses multiple styles. He sings high, he sings low, he sings soft, he sings loud.
Yep.
I don't know that he's ever put out an album where he was as truly dynamic as he is on this recording.
Yeah, well, Never Let Me Down, I thought his vocals were great on that, but I won't go down that rabbit hole again. Yeah, look, outstanding vocals on this album, especially the ballads.
Yeah.
It really brings it out. But if you want to have an interesting listening experience, and this is to all our viewers, the physical version of Toy has not come out in Australia as of yet, so I've had to listen to it on YouTube. And I've listened to it a few times, and I've done an exercise where I've done a comparison between the version in the 60s versus the version done in the year 2000, and it makes a very interesting listening experience, and you sort of work out which are better than others. And like I said, with the I Dig Everything, completely night and day different. One is like an early bossa nova, and the band doing just a straight 4 on the floor rock version.
You mentioned both Conversation Piece and Shadow Man. I think Shadow Man is going to be a lot of people's favorite track on the album.
Yeah.
And it's one that apparently goes back, it's later than 70. It's like from his Ziggy Stardust days when he wrote it, but it was never recorded until the Toy sessions. So it's one that is a newish song. And
it was on the B side of Everybody Says Hi. So they released that as a CD single, and it might be on one of the, one of our viewers will probably correct me, it was one of the expanded editions of Heaven, but it was definitely on the B side.
Prior to 2000 is what I'm saying.
No,
Didn't exist in recorded form prior to 2000. And
absolutely.
It's a great song. but they should not have put it right next door to Conversation Piece, which is stylistically similar. They're both about the same level of energy. They're introspective songs. They needed to split those up a little wider and let that breathe instead of having this, two very good songs that are two in the same area to me next to each other. That doesn't leave either track enough space to shine. There are a couple of songs. Let's see if I can find which ones. I really did not like the songs where Tony Visconti put string arrangements on them.
Right.
Because they sound exactly like Burt Bacharach songs to me.
Would that be Silly Boy Blue?
Silly Boy Blue is definitely one of the two that sounds exactly like
thought
Burt
that was
Bacharach.
Those lyrics are very much where Bowie was exploring Buddhism and very Tibetan sort of orientated lyrics.
Right.
I put the arrangement doesn't really support this one, and the lyrics are a little bit, in my view, a bit nonsensical, and that was one that I could have been culled. But I understand, some of the string arrangements. You think it pushes the envelope too hard, based on the material.
What I think it does is it makes it too 1960s. It's, you can very easily imagine those songs appearing on the Austin Powers soundtrack because, and I'm not taking anything away from Burt Bacharach. My parents loved Burt Bacharach. If you are into that style of music and it was huge in the late 1960s, then more power to you. That's not what I want from David Bowie in the year 2000, though. And if you compare that sound to, again, the sound he got on Shadow Man or Toy, Your Turn to Drive, the last song in the album, very modern sounding production. There are no tricks that are making it sound kind of 60s-esque, right? And the backing vocals are another big one. Whether the backing vocals are 1960s-esque or modern sounding completely affects the picture of the song.
Yeah, I think the backing vocals are modern. They're not that Ronette style. I go back to I Dig Everything. Listen to the original where you've got that Ronettes. It's almost like the Phil Spector type production. But I think that the backing vocals are modern sounding. One thing I want to ask you, Reed, is that, so the album got shelved. If it did get released, how do you think it would have done? Because let's face it, Hours and Outside commercially didn't do well. Bowie always did well in his home base of UK. And when I say home base, he didn't live in the UK, but I'm talking about, in the UK, that's where he's got the solid fan base. Those albums went to number one or at least top 5. I can see this album would have charted high, but I can't see a hit. I can see a lot of these, what you would call FM album tracks that would be played on radio. It would easily go into his song set live and would, hold up with all his greatest hits. But I can't see a hit. I can't see like any of these being a top 10 or a top 5. What do you think?
Certainly, as a commercial force, and again, as an American, One Outside, which is an album I love, but it had zero impact on American radio. Earthling, I think, had one song, Jump They Say, that got some airplay. And then Hours, actually, I think I heard The Pretty Things Are Going to Hell on radio one time. Because at the time I wasn't listening to David Bowie at all, and they played that song and I went, oh, David Bowie's still releasing albums? He was just not a commercial force in the US for all of the 90s. I think Tin Machine was the last album he had that sold in this country.
Right.
And this album was not going to change that opinion. But if you listen, you had talked earlier about listening to the old and new versions of the songs. I recommend listening to Hours and then Toys and then Heathen.
Yeah, that's yeah.
You
A
can
good
just
path
kind
to
of
follow.
see,
I think that's a good path
yeah,
to follow for our viewers if you want to get that sort of experience. But I think the whole experience of toys being shelved, him
right.
going to Columbia, recording Heathen, I think, I think the band, by going through this process, did rejuvenate him artistically, because I think Heathen is a very, very strong album.
I
It
like
did
Haven.
have like a resurrection of sorts commercially in the US. It went to number 17. You
Right.
started seeing him to do the talk show circuit, and I think Everybody Says Hi was like a radio hit, but it was certainly, he was getting a lot more exposure. And then that went on to Reality, which is another strong album, and he did a world tour, and then was silent for 10,
Let
10
me throw
years.
out this for consideration too. If you look at 90s Bowie, he is industrialized, right? He looks like he's borrowing his clothes from Trent Reznor. He's got that little chin beard and he's got the spiky hair. And it's a completely different David Bowie. By the time you get to Heathen, he looks like this David Bowie again. You can see his
Yeah.
picture there behind you. And I think that that is much more what people who were his age, and of course, when you're a musician, you're always going to have a lot of fans that are more or less your same age, right? Say within
Yes.
5 years.
Yes.
And this is probably what people wanted. And what I remember from the early 2000s David Bowie is that he was nice. Industrial Bowie was kind of acerbic, right? He was always talking about avant-garde things. And I remember him doing an interview on National Public Radio when Heathen came out. And he was kind of annoyed that they wanted to ask him about Let's Dance. And I remember him saying, look, in this country, that album is all anybody ever asked me about. You know what? I've had 6 albums since then. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
And he was kind of annoyed at that. But he was a good interviewer, and he was polite. And
absolutely,
he was what people wanted to see. And I think that image really helped move his career forward. Whereas 90s industrial Bowie, people were like, is he trying to be 25? I mean,
yeah, I disagree, because, like, he was going through the drum and bass
right.
genre, which was very prevalent in the club scene. And then he was exploring a lot of the industrial, and he was, with the Trent Reznor sort of thing. And I found that highly, experimental, that such a major artist was willing to explore and push himself into new genres. Because let's face it, in the 90s, dance music, electronic music was just phenomenally popular. Chemical Brothers, the Prodigy, they were sort of so wildly popular, and Bowie has got the ear on the latest thing, and his ears were up, and he was going, I want to go down that rabbit hole and explore that. But in respect of Toy, in respect of this era, I think that he was getting nostalgic. He wanted to go back. And I think the thing that kickstarted that was his performance at Glastonbury in year 2000. He was quite nervous. He was in front of 250,000 people in a field, and he got he got so warmly received, and it was just a greatest hits package. And a lot of people rate it as one of the greatest Glastonbury performances ever. It's out on CD, DVD, record. If you haven't got it, do yourself a favor and check it out. That led into this creative, the band's firing, let's do Toy, gets shelved, puts all his energy into Heathen, which went, relatively commercially well, and then Reality, and then you had a bit of a break for a period of time. So, look, I think it would have charted. I don't know if it would have been like number one Toy, or Toy being a number one album, but I don't think it would have been, a commercial failure. And I think that, anyway, I'm just privileged that we were able to hear this. And I wonder what else is in the vault. Is there more Bowie a la Prince locked in a vault that we can hear, and for all of his fans
I don't know. They
can
keep
enjoy?
releasing new live albums. I think they've released 6 since he
Yes.
died. So it would not surprise me if they just continually release live music. I would love to. I'm a big fan of inside baseball, is the term we use in the US, right? That the inside details. I want to know about the business. In the 2000s, Bowie sold Bowie bucks. Do you remember this?
No.
You could buy interest in Bowie's catalog.
Right.
And it was apparently, a lot of oil barons and things from the Middle East bought Bowie bucks. And this is how he finally paid off. Oh, I am blanking on the man's name, but his producer from the 70s owned all of his stuff.
Yep.
And he was finally able to pay him off in the 21st century, which is absolutely astounding.
And
But
Bowie sold his catalog. The estate
right.
has sold it for $250,000 to Sony, I think. Look, viewers will correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that it's been sold. So
you hope that Iman and his kids are well taken care of.
Yes, absolutely. And his catalog has been looked after respectfully, and
Right.
it doesn't push, the latest Nike or Coca-Cola commercial. It's used very respectfully. Look, I really enjoyed talking about this. One thing I want to say when I finish, I was reflecting on Bowie and his standing in popular music. So going back hundreds and hundreds of years, if you're a classic music aficionado, you look at Mozart, Bach, and Beethoven. So you look at popular music in the 20th century, in 100, 200, 300 years' time, who do you think they're going to look at as solo artists, as the greats? And I was thinking Sinatra, Presley, and you'd have to say David Bowie. They'd be the 3. And I'm talking about that have made an impact on popular culture and popular music.
Right.
So I'm thinking, putting a crystal ball, 500 years time in a reference book, who would they look at the 20th century? And I'd say Bowie is definitely got to be one of those that are going to be referred
interesting
to.
thought. I hope that's true. I don't think I know of any artist that has such, Bowie influenced punks. The punks liked things like Suffragette City. Bowie influenced heavy metal. Metallica and Dave Mustaine were David Bowie fans. Bowie influenced pop. He influenced so many different genres.
Yep.
Ambient and whatever you call Iggy Pop's music. I still think The Idiot and Lust for Life are 2 of the best Bowie albums that Bowie never recorded.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as always, really great talking with you, Reed. This is a really interesting chat of Toy. Check out the Toy album. I'll get my physical copy one day. Sooner rather than later. It's probably on the plane across. Please subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Everyone, put your comments down. We'd like to see it. What are your favorite Bowie tracks, your favorite Bowie albums? And I'm sure Reed and I are going to talk Bowie in the not foreseeable, very shortly, because I really enjoy talking about Bowie. All right, all the best. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Rock on.